G'day folks, it's Frank here. How are we all doing today? Well, interesting. I was doing some study on my next topic, which is the history of disfellowshipping within the organisation of Jehovah's Witnesses. And as I was doing some research, I came across this article, and it really the comments in this article was talking about the organisation prior to the 2015 Royal Commission, and in that article it went about the talked about the beliefs of the organisation, and then there was a quote by the legal person of or lawyer of the organisation, a gentleman by the name of Vin Toole, and it said quoting him. Now, it hasn't got the whole conversation of what he said, but apparently shunning, which is what happens when, if you don't know, if you're disfellowshipped as a JW, Jehovah's Witness, whoever that person or man or woman is, once they announce that they're disfellowshipped, the congregation will no longer talk to that person or start shunning that person. It's a global thing. It happens globally. So it's a practice within the organisation. Shunning, avoiding you, never talking to you, etc. There are some areas where if you're a married person, you do have obviously conversation with your husband or wife if you're disfellowship, but not on a spiritual level. But for the rest of the congregation, they completely will not talk to you, discuss anything, not socialise with you or anything. Well, in this article, as I was doing this research, I was really surprised by Vin Toole's words. This is taken from The Age. It was in 2013 by a writer, Chris Johnson. And he said here, let me just find it, said a spokesman for the church in Australia. First he talked about how former members who are currently being shunned are being bullied, threat and harassed, I reckon, and stalking to lure the apostate or lapsed member back. So he's saying this is what the organisation does. Then he quotes the Watchtower as describing apostates as mentally diseased outcasts who seek to infect others. But when questioned about the organisation's policy on shunning, Vincent Toole said this. Well, it just has one word here. Vincent Toole dismissed the allegations and said shunning was a myth. Now, can you believe that? Shunning is a myth. I don't know. When I saw that, I couldn't believe it. I mean, really? I mean, I know I'm being shunned right now by my two older kids, and they're baptised witnesses. So I can tell you it's not a myth; it's real. It is fair dinkum real. So I just thought I'd share that with you because one thing we know about God, He's not frightened by our choices in life. He's not frightened. Jesus Christ is not frightened by the going-ons of the kingdom and those who are on earth and who claim to be His believers, His followers. There's all sorts of stuff going on, right? Do you see Him shunning anybody? No, He welcomes them all, continually is there for them, right? And yet, the example then that the organisation of Jehovah's Witnesses is completely opposite to Jesus. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, shunning, I think, personally, if we look at it at a balanced point of view, okay, we're talking about the organisation right now. It's hard on both sides. It's hard for those who are in, because they're loyal to the organisation, and it affects them. And it's hard for us who are out. It affects us as well because we have family or friends who are in. So shunning has a detrimental effect on both sides. And we see shunning right through communities as well. We see it in the workplace, for example. If you're singled out, maybe your job is on the line, especially if you're usually the lower end people, right? People avoid you. And eventually, if you get sacked, no one wants to know you, right? So shunning happens there. Shunning happens with relationships, the silent treatment. You could be married. Your wife gives you, or your husband gives you the silent treatment, or you're having a relationship issue. Someone decides they never want to talk to you. Well, they're shunning you, aren't they? School, bullies, shunning. Even we as parents will instruct our kids who we think is a good friend and who we think isn't a good friend. So there's this practice that plays on in daily lives. Even the Bible warns us about association. However, to the degree that the organisation of Jehovah's Witnesses go, and this is also with other institutions, many religions do the same thing, but not to the nth degree as Jehovah's Witnesses carry out this mandate to completely cut you off, as it were. And it's sad because it really hurts people. It puts people who are vulnerable even in a more vulnerable state. Let me see. If you're someone like myself, maybe you've been through conscience, you've seen that the organisation is no longer truthful, because one of the things, what disturbs me with this comment from Vin Tool is the candor of the Bible writers, the honesty, behind their words, the way they felt, the way they spoke to God, and the way God is not afraid to just openly express what he thinks, good or bad, however we perceive it, right? It's open there for you to study and examine. Now, what Vin Tool has done, he's done the opposite. He said it's a myth. He's hiding something, isn't he? He knows it's embarrassing because that's in 2013. They have an up-and-coming Royal Commission in 2015. So he is playing down this shunning policy within the organisation. Why? Well, because they're about to head before the courts and have to explain why they're shunning victims of child abuse, right? Now, if they felt that policy was truthful and honest, they would have said so. He wouldn't have said it's a myth, like it's nothing, like, what are you talking about? It's ludicrous. We don't do that, sort of thing. Of course, if he was really truthful and honest, he would have just said straight out, yeah, we do shun people. But can you say that and truthful and be like okay with that? You know what I mean? And that's where we see why, just in his word, just in that little phrase, it's a myth, the falsehood of it all. Because, the candor of those early prophets and even Jesus, they weren't afraid to talk the truth. And even if it meant them being persecuted, put aside by their own people, and even killed by their own people, Jesus said all the prophets that these people had killed for speaking the truth. You see? So we see just immediately on that little point that they're not really truth seekers. They're hiding behind a lie. And the lie is that they want to keep their own reputation intact within the world. At the same time, isolate those who are the most vulnerable, the needy, the poor, the needy, those who are struggling. Now, it doesn't mean that, like for myself, I'm okay, but maybe you are suffering from shunning, right? Maybe you need that connection back. But see, that's the problem of this sort of policy. If it was if it was biblical, they wouldn't have been saying, it's a myth, or hiding behind it, or being ashamed to admit it. If you saw the Royal Commission, you'd see the shame on their faces. They would not admit it openly. That is a policy that is harmful. In fact, one sister told me not long ago that she felt it was very loving, because that's how they're instructed, right? It's a loving thing to disfellowship with you and to shun you. Don't get me wrong. I mean, many people, like for example in the book of Corinthians, it talks about removing that person. Corinthians, I think it's 1:5, 1 Corinthians chapter 5. But Paul highlighted that person's sins were worse than the people in the world, right? So he had to sort of be removed. He was an embarrassment to not only himself but to the congregation. But it wasn't as if they couldn't talk to him. It wasn't long after him being kicked out that Paul said, go and get him, bring him back in, because in fear that he might, drown himself out there in the world. And so, anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you guys. I was just a little bit surprised when I saw that. I don't know what you think. I mean, I think that look, I think if you're out and you're feeling, have you done the wrong thing, or are you to blame, or something like that, I really want you to have a look at 1 Peter chapter 2, 19 to 23. 1 Peter chapter 2. We'll read it together. 1 Peter chapter 2 and 19. Excuse me, sorry, just getting it up. It says here, for this is acceptable, if for conscience toward God a man endureth grief, suffering wrongfully. For what glory is it, if when ye sin and are buffeted for it, you shall take it patiently? But if when you do well and suffer for it, you shall take it patiently, this is acceptable with God. For hereunto were ye called, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow his steps. Who did no sin, neither was guile found in his mouth. Who, when he was reviled not again. When he himself suffered, threatened not, but committed himself to him that judgeth righteously. So, really, for us, if you're someone that by conscience you just can't be there anymore, and God's saying, well, there's nothing. It's okay. You've done nothing wrong. So there's no need to try and get it even. There's no hatred. I don't hate the organisation. I think they're a corporate organisation basically. They have a corporate side, they have a religious side, and they've meshed the two together, and that's what it is. And whoever's in it has to understand that they have to meet legal requirements with the biblical, and then they include that in the biblical teachings, and this is where they stuff up basically. But we as children of God, we don't have to worry about that anymore. But anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you. I mean, it is an ugly thing, shunning. It's happens though throughout society, and of course for us, we don't want to hold any resentment. It's hard on both sides of the fence. We have people in and us out. We want to be together. The society's keeping us apart. It's not a loving thing, it's a terrible thing. And so all we can do is, continue on our path, because hopefully those within will see the harmful effects that not having freedom of speech does to people, that they are actually under control, because a lot of people who speak out get in trouble, and that's all it is, isn't it? Speaking out against the governing body, or speaking out against doctrines or failed policies. I mean, if there was an open discussion, we wouldn't be in this position. But because there isn't, we are forced to make choices that affect people. At the same time, their policies don't help. But they'll never change. Those policies will never won't change for not the near foreseeable future anyway, as far as I can see. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you guys. It was the Age paper 2013. It's a myth, officially. What did you know? What do you know? All right, guys. Catch up with you soon. I am working on this history of the disfellowshipping. It's quite interesting, actually. You'll find it. All right, take care. Talk to you soon. Huh?